All right, welcome everyone. This is the September 11 meeting of the IPython/Jupyter project, and we had a little hiatus last week because we had the all-hands meeting here at Berkeley with folks visiting us from outside, and it was very productive, very busy. For those interested, the minutes, our notes are on the hackpad. We're not going to take the time to kind of recap everything. The main new piece of activity that was kind of a new type is that we had Adrian Wantaluk, our designer, working with us on a logo, and the logo is now finalized and it's ready on the repo. So anybody who's interested can go have a look at the logo pull request, which should be merged pretty soon into the main Jupyter design repo. And let's get going with the agenda. I think, Kyle, you have some stuff about Docker images up first.
Yeah, so right, the Docker notebooks have taken, people have taken off with them and started using them. There are
cool.
392 downloads yesterday. I haven't looked again today.
Wow.
And then I started looking at the forks to see what people were doing with them that maybe they thought were missing.
Good.
One's actually using the bleeding latest of IPython. So I was like, we should probably do that anyways, so that when we make those announcements about new features, someone could just run the current version of the notebook server. Mm-hmm. Separate from those base ones that we would want to function well at a tutorial or whatever.
Official one, yeah.
Yeah. Another person switched to Python 3, which I went ahead and started doing in a PR as well. Someone removed the SSL stuff.
Why?
Security, who needs it?
Well, I mean, if you're running it locally, it's fine.
But I mean, does it get in the way in any particular? Does it really get in the way?
I don't know. I asked in the repository. I haven't gotten a response.
Huh.
What was that?
What did you say, man?
It's using self-signed certs, right?
Yeah.
Self-signed certs are annoying.
They are annoying. You can configure it with a different cert. I even used it with the Jupyter cert to try it out.
Yeah.
And then host it off our domain, and I was like, cool, that worked easily. You have to mount the certificate, though. You have to provide it to the Docker image. And then one installed LaTeX dependencies, and I'm not sure if, maybe we should be doing that. I'm not sure. If we export, I don't know.
Having LaTeX and Panda, eventually I think that image should be a fairly full-featured image, and PDF export with math has to go through LaTeX anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, that answers that question then.
Yeah, and there's nothing else that can render the mathematics if you want to get a PDF out of it. So.
Okay. Cool. I ended up commenting on some of these forks in their commits, bring them back to the main repo, and I was like, hey. So what do you think of this? We're going ahead and doing this. And they chimed in with opinions, and I was really happy, because then they started submitting pull requests.
Excellent.
So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's really great.
So the Python 3 thing, right, so I have a PR for that. Thomas has reviewed it.
What a surprise!
So his opinion is we should default to Python 3, only install the packages for Python 3 everywhere. I might be of that opinion because it seems like it's the way forward. But as I
request, I might be of the opinion that my pull request is the right thing to do.
Well, no, I mean at least way forward for IPython. We can install the IPython stuff and then have the 2.7 kernel there.
Well, not only the kernel, but I think we should that image should carry the full Python 2 stack. So because there are a lot of people who are still using in production things with the Python 2 stack, and the other thing that I would want to do is before we make the default be Python 3, have the kernel, have the notebook server be able to remember the last choice of kernel for the user. I think the majority of our target audience is still on Python 2.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to basically make Python 3 the default kernel and have people have to, every time they use an image, have to manually select Python 3. That's annoying. But that problem is solved really easily. The moment the UI remembers what your last choice was, Even if
it's not actually the easiest thing in the world, since that's a front end only operation.
Mm-hmm.
So is it? What do you mean by, in terms of operations, what the server could actually do is select a kernel based on the last save? It can't do, because when you select a kernel, there's no server operation. Do you want to save it or do you want to save it in a cookie or something?
No, well, I think the first requirement is that the
when you select
new node
is a server operation because it has to.
Oh, okay. So it's the last kernel started.
But I think the way we were talking before is that we move the main kernel selection to the dashboard, and the new notebook button becomes a drop-down.
Exactly.
And then we just save a cookie for the last state of that.
Exactly.
Well, what about recently? So it should only be the last new notebook. It shouldn't be affected by opening existing notebook. Is it the last open notebook, the last new notebook, the last saved notebook?
I think the useful state there is sort of what is the new notebook action. Like if you open a notebook and you start switching kernels, that should only really affect that notebook.
Yeah, and I agree with that. If somebody sends me an R notebook and I look at it, I think that the action that signals the most explicit user intent is the creation of blank notebooks, because that's when I'm saying this is what I do, right? If somebody mails me an Octave notebook, I may look at it. That doesn't mean that my next notebook wants to be an Octave notebook. So I would say we make Python 3 the default when this is when the UI, the new notebook UI, has a drop selector that can remember the state with a cookie. Because otherwise, I think
alternate proposal.
What's that?
Go ahead. Sorry, finish your thought.
No, otherwise I just think we're going to annoy people. I mean, right now the majority of our scientific Python audience is still defaults to Python 2. That's just the reality. And having to switch kernels on every new notebook start and on every opening is just annoying.
Yeah.
Alternate proposal.
Well, it won't be on every opening because the kernel spec is saved in the notebook.
Okay, on every
the whole point of the kernel spec is that you only pick a kernel for a notebook one time.
Yes.
Yeah, but having to do that on every creation is going to be annoying. I imagine people are going to be using these things for teaching, and right now, as far as I've seen around here, all the teaching with scientific stuff is still being done on Python 2, and having students end up on Python 3 by accident is going to just be potentially confusing. So I would say, but let's wait until that selector works the way we want it to work, and then it's a no-brainer to make the switch.
Okay.
Yeah. The not necessarily entirely serious alternate proposal is that we could make it Python 3 by default and use that as an incentive to actually doing that UI.
Yeah, I'm basically at Python 3 now.
Yeah, me too. I mean, with the LaTeX Unicode thing, that is pushing me way in the direction of Python 3. But I'm being realistic here about our broadly deployed user base is.
I think this
although to be fair, realize that our defaults affect
that. Yeah, we have an impact. Yeah, we have an impact.
Defaults, Anaconda's defaults. The defaults are probably more important than the language features in terms of Python 3 versus 2 adoption. So if we never make Python 3 the default before adoption makes it the more.
Oh no! And the moment that UI element has improved, I'm happy pushing people even harder by making that choice.
Yeah.
Just that I don't think without that UI element being a little bit more friendly, it's a good idea. I mean, people are going to have a ton of Python 2 notebooks out there for teaching, and having somebody rewrite their class materials for the semester when the semester is up and running is just not very... Okay, Damian, that's all right. Is probably just not a good idea. So.
I think there's a wonderful lesson in Python 3 and the LaTeX completions, and I guess the way that I would phrase my take-home is
it shows that it's important to package backwards incompatibility with like something sweet, like frosting on top,
with something you want,
rather than some nasty medicine that you have to drink.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I mean, 3.5 is going to make us all want to go there. The @ operator, other things that may be coming, that's actually going to make us want to go there, rather than begrudgingly say, well, I guess we have to. It's time to drink the medicine. And for us, the LaTeX Unicode thing is another chunk of good, tasty candy to go in that direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Kyle, keep going, please.
And then, so I opened a PR to actually create a Docker image for the examples section of IPython.
Mm-hmm.
So as we change the examples, someone can build up the environment that has all the examples and the dependencies for those examples and be able to run through them directly. And then it'll just base itself off of the
nice
SciPy server image.
I like that.
Nice, very nice. Can you clarify, please, there's 2 sub-bullet points about stats models and Open Blast, but you didn't explain what you meant by those 2. Can you clarify for us?
Oh, where's this?
Underneath the heading about Python 3.
So I told Olivier about the images.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, hey, you should check out these 2 Docker images that I have for building Open Blast on the system. And then, linking that up with NumPy and SciPy. And I was like, great. And he's defaulting to Python 3. And so I went ahead and just brought his stuff directly into our images and added him as a committer.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all. It was just kind of a cool.
No, great. And we're going to see him next week in Seattle, so we'll touch bases with him on this. Great.
That's it.
Okay. NB format, the mother of all PRs.
I meant bigger. Yeah, so I did the heading cell stuff. The heading cells are gone.
Okay, and so the pull request that Matthias has open addresses the deprecation UI part of it.
Did he just open one a couple minutes ago?
No, hold on. He opened this very shortly after the dev meeting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm not doing any deprecation UI stuff like that for this PR. I figure we can do that one.
So he has one, start removing header UI.
Number?
It is 6418. I'm betting that you already implemented this stuff.
I mean, I removed everything. I didn't do any deprecation.
Okay.
64 what?
6418. Can you look at that real quick, Min, to see if you've already done this stuff? I'm guessing you have. I mean, this is a 10-line change that we should probably just close this.
Yes, I've done this, although his regular expression is better than mine. So I'll take that. He's already made that comment on my PR.
Yeah. Okay, I'll close his PR then.
Yeah, so the actual this doesn't include any of the deprecation stuff, but the actual deprecation stuff I will not do PR. So it's more complicated and required.
Okay. Brian, do those notes accurately reflect what? And Min?
Yeah.
Okay.
So as
no.
No?
What?
Matthias's PR does.
No.
Oh, it's not a okay.
Yeah. I've already closed 6418.
Okay.
Min already has the regular expression in a comment in his pull request.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was mostly straightforward. The fact that we now use Mistune made implementing one of the things I was concerned about actually super simple, and that was
adding anchors to.
Yeah, adding anchors to headings.
Yeah.
We now
talked about that.
But the Mistune Markdown renderer gives you a hook for when it's going to make a heading, and you just tell it what to make. And
nice.
Yeah, it was, since the add anchor stuff already existed, it was 2 lines. So,
awesome.
So that was easy. I did write the so I removed the drop down menus and heading cell actual type, but I did implement the 2 heading function still exists, and then there's a markdown method for when you do the keyboard shortcuts for make it a heading. It makes the first line of a markdown cell a markdown heading of that level.
I think that's a good that's a friendly deprecation.
Yeah.
But if we want to do the thing in the drop down menu, or I think that should be a separate.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So the really sticky question in NB format is, now that we have this wonderful validation, what do we do when it fails? And it can fail in a variety of circumstances, and what to do might differ in those circumstances.
From a realistic perspective, what's the most likely situation where a user would open a notebook that fails validation?
The cases that have existed, so I will use this precedent. The known bugs that we have had that created notebooks that would fail in validation were writing HTML entities to the prompt number instead of an integer.
Okay.
There was a typo, a stream versus name typo, so that for a little bit in master, stream outputs would have the stream name in 2 different keys.
Mm-hmm.
So there's stream, it's like stream standard out, and it should be name standard out. And there was a typo that would result in both of those keys being defined. And in both of those cases, the bugs lasted for a while because, first, there was no feedback that the bug existed because there was no validation, and second, because the bug actually just created extra fields are safely ignored. So in terms of validation, there's a question about when to run validation and when to raise, when to log, when to warn. Logging, the difference between logging and warning is warning means you show it to actually the user in the notebook UI, and logging meaning you just put it to it's just information. It doesn't change what happens. It's just information in the log for debugging reasons, basically.
I mean, given how rare this hopefully will be, I think we should. My initial thought is to not allow the user to open an invalid notebook, partially from the security standpoint. I feel like this gives us more confidence that the data we're pulling over, is notebook data. It's not some crazy thing that is going to trigger weird behavior in the UI.
The argument against refusing to open an invalid notebook is that we have no tools for making an invalid notebook valid. So if a notebook is invalid, your only recourse is to go in and edit the JSON by hand.
Yeah.
Which is a surefire way to make it worse. At least in my experience.
Pretty much.
What about the following? If we detect an invalid notebook, we open it with a different name. We make a copy of it, and we open a copy where we drop all invalid elements, and we tell the user, we are opening the parts we know are sensible. We're leaving your original node, or we rename the original to -invalid and open. So, but we inform the user. We have just opened a version that may be missing information, but that information is invalid. We don't know what it is. This is the error message maybe. If you feel this is a bug in IPython, go here to report it, whatever. But basically, here's the part we can process, just to get people out of the bind that you're talking about, Min, but without trying to pull into the UI information that we don't even know how to process. Is that viable? Because that seems to me like it would provide a reasonable user experience, in that people get something that is mostly correct, or at least the parts that are correct they get, which is likely going to be their text, their input, their code, and there may be some weird output that was mangled for some reason, and it's missing one bit of output, but they can recover from that. Or it's missing all the prompt numbers because they got encoded wrong. There was HTML entities in the prompt numbers, and so they get a notebook without prompt numbers, but it's otherwise fine. Would that work? Is that sensible?
To implement, because I would essentially have to take all of the JSON schema validation and re-implement it all in Python.
Yeah, and my thought is that
it tells me visually, and even logically, I get a JSON. Thing. Can people still hear me? Okay.
At least for me, you froze for a second. Can you repeat the last sentence?
The last sentence was just, "Can you hear me?" because it looked like I froze.
Okay.
So, it would be tricky to go from the failure to validate to. So for removing if a prompt number is invalid, that shows up as. No. I would need to know the proper value. So the first thing that's hard is actually finding the element that was invalid.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because I'm not walking it with my own Python. I'm just passing, here's an entire notebook.
Yeah. Got it. I didn't know how the logic worked. I didn't know if you were walking and had very fine-grained exceptions where you could say, okay, here's an error, throw this element away, keep going. And
the exception classes the exception that's raised has lots of information, and it's not just text.
Yeah.
Like, you get the actual Python dictionary that failed to validate, and then you get a lot of information, and the schema that it failed to validate against.
Mm-hmm.
So you do get quite a bit of information, but it would be a significant amount of work to turn that exception into, all right, I found the thing that failed. Now what to do with it? Do I delete it? Would that make it worse? Like, if the cells don't validate, if the cells list doesn't validate, and I delete the cells list, then I've made an invalid notebook, and then I validate it again, and then I delete the notebook, and I've got an empty dictionary.
Yeah. And
so
my feeling is, from Min's description, an invalid notebook, unless someone goes and literally edits their JSON by hand and breaks it, will be a rare occurrence.
Yeah. Hopefully that's the case.
So I think our solution should be as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Like, I think we don't want something that's difficult for us to implement. Like, it needs to be extremely simple.
No, absolutely. No, I mean, if I didn't know how the logige worked. If our logic was that we were walking the data structure, then it would be very easy to just throw away anything that doesn't validate.
This is one thing that is, I suppose, a disadvantage of using the JSON schema stuff rather than just implementing, as we tend to do, just doing it all ourselves and writing our own validation in Python, because then we would have all the logic we already need, because we would be implementing everything ourselves.
Well, I mean, that speaks to me that a nice design for a validation tool for JSON schema would be to have a callback API where you can define basically what happens at the node level, but we're not there. So another question on a different axis as another potential option. We simply inform the user, and is there any tool out there that is not something we create but that exists, that is more of a JSON sort of tree editor that we could point people to and say, go and open, like, these are the error messages, because you're saying they're somewhat informative, right? So these are the error messages, look at them, and go and download or use this web tool or whatever that lets you edit raw JSON, and basically have a look. You do it, not us, but you do it. These are the error messages. go open this raw JSON tree with this tool that doesn't try to interpret it as a notebook or as code, but is going to give you something better than opening JSON in Emacs, right? It's going to give you a handle on the tree structure of the JSON, and maybe try to delete the pieces that are missing. So, is that for real? Is that URL for real, Min?
I mean, I googled it. I clicked it. It looks like a thing.
Oh, seriously? Wow. No, I was actually imagining exactly that, a JSON editor online. So, well, perfect. We tell people.
I don't know if it's any good, but it exists.
Something like paste it in there. Try to start deleting the pieces, and I mean, editing with that may be a little bit less barbaric than editing the JSON in a.
Where's this link?
In the Gitter chat room. It's very easy, Brian. It's called JSON Editor Online, all one word. One case where the domain was indeed available. The obvious domain was available.
Oh, cool.
So I mean, because it could be as simple as dumping the exceptions to the screen and telling people. Try to upload it. Yeah, try to upload it here.
Yeah, I might use this next time.
I know.
Valid notebooks all the time because I'm working on this.
Yeah.
I know.
This is really slick. I'm like, oh wow.
Do we go with that idea? Because that's no skin off our backs. I'm sorry?
It appears to be open source.
There's a source code link at the bottom of it.
It's on GitHub.
But I mean, I'm not even talking about.
We can include it in IPython.
No,
right?
Please.
Sorry, I'm kidding.
Stop the madness.
Okay.
A link, one hyperlink, where we tell people go to that thing.
Let me describe what.
Would that work?
I think it would. The argument against refusing to open invalid notebooks is that all known validation failures are safely, all known bugs that have caused validation failures are actually result in notebooks whose invalidity is safely ignored.
Mm-hmm. Very benign.
So based on that, and the fact that that raising means you can't even open an invalid notebook, and so like if it's invalid output, clear output will solve your problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what I have now is if you open an invalid notebook, you get as seen in screenshots that I posted on PR. Is a great big dialogue with the, so if you open an invalid notebook or save an invalid notebook, you get a big old dialogue saying, this is invalid, this is the validation error. I think we probably want that whether we allow opening it or not.
Yeah.
Right now, it shows you this is what's invalid. That is probably not super informative to most people, given the structure of the information and the need to understand the notebook format to look at it. But at least it's something they can paste in a bug report. And it allows it to pass through. So when I look at the invalid notebooks that I have created, that have been created by bugs in IPython, that we have put out, where it works just fine, you get this big ugly warning and says, yeah, this invalid thing happened, your notebook might not behave properly. And if it's an invalid thing that gets as far as it won't even load, then you get
okay.
this didn't even load.
I'm convinced. I just uploaded. Has anyone actually tried to put a notebook into that JSON editor online?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I'm convinced that the approach should be provide these error messages to the user, do what you're saying, allow the opening, but with a message that says, if you basically point people to this, if you need to do structural editing, if when you open this it doesn't work well or whatever, but just point people to this tool. If you need to do surgery on the notebook, this is going to be a way safer way to do surgery on it than to try to get the matching braces right in Emacs or in a text editor. And then we can follow what you're suggesting of saying, if it's benign, we'll try to open it, but by providing people the right error messages and point them to a tool that can help them with that error message, I think we can wash our hands off of this one reasonably, in a reasonably user-friendly way.
Okay.
Do we have any idea of how they get corrupted? Like what typical?
Yeah. So the bugs that we've known, the two bugs that have created the most invalid notebooks are very early on, when writing the. So when a prompt, when an execution cell is executing or hasn't executed, we write HTML entities to the prompt field. We write non-breaking space or an asterisk. There were bugs where we were reading that value and putting that in the JSON when the only valid values for prompt number are integers or null. So you'd have a string in the prompt number, and that would be an invalid. That would fail to validate because it wrote a string to the prompt field. The other bug was a typo that, when we're building the output structure, we do output when it's a stream output, we do output.name equals standard out. Output.name equals output.text equals some text. There was a bug where, because in current IPython, there's a mismatch between the keys in the message and the keys in the output. So it's name and data in the message spec, and it's text and it's name and data in the message spec, and it's stream and text in the notebook format. For no reason, it's just because. And so, because of that confusion, there was a typo using the wrong key, and there was a default value. Essentially, a code that had a default value for the stream name, but it used the message spec key instead of the output key. So you would get basically, in addition to the correct name, standard out or standard error, and text, the actual text, you would also have a key that was stream standard out.
So
that would be invalid because it has extra,
yeah.
Because it fails to validate on the additional properties.
It's basically IPython bugs, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's reasonable to assume.
Right. If you author your own notebook, then you can become valid in any of a million ways.
Yeah.
Such as all the notebooks that I've written while in the middle of changing what v4 means. Those are all wildly invalid for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
But
I guess we reasonably expect that even if they end up back in the editor, that they're of course going to post to the dev list and say, "Hey, this is happening," right?
Yes.
And they'll find.
So the odds are that if validation fails, it is actually an IPython bug.
Yeah.
And the question is, do we want to make it so that people can't open notebooks because of our own bug? And the worst case would be a bug in validation, right? Where it's like, this is actually valid, but you guys wrote the validation wrong, and it's just shouting at me, and I don't understand. And
okay.
If that went the extra mile of not just shouting at you, but refusing to open your notebook, that would be real annoying.
Yeah.
Be real mad.
And I guess the other case, which are pretty obvious to people, is when they pull the notebook, but GitHub didn't give them the full thing because the notebook was more than 25 megabytes.
That fails on a different level. Oh, the most common failure to open is a failure to even parse JSON.
Right.
And that actually fails at a different level.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
So that says this isn't even a notebook. I didn't include that. So that doesn't even get as far as validation. Validation assumes it reasonably resembles a notebook. But yeah, if it's an HTML page, it said you get an error that's like invalid notebook, failed to parse JSON something, and then the first blob of.
Okay. And if somebody wants to, they can create steamroll IPython.js for their custom extensions.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the last NB format 4 question, I think, is widget outputs are going to be part of this?
Well, I mean, we had said we wanted to do the unification of widgets and outputs for 3.0.
Yeah, so the question is, validation makes changing that kind of thing harder. So it might make sense to hold NB format 4 until that gets in.
Yeah, and I think my main concern is that enough people run off of master. I don't want us to have to deal with the fact that there are multiple different versions of v4 formats in the wild.
Yeah, basically, once it gets merged into master, we have to include v4 to v4 conversion.
Exactly, and
v4 evolves, and so the widget stuff is the last known thing that we plan to do. There will probably be tweaks, like it's okay. They'll be annoying, but that's okay. The other thing is forward compatible validation stuff, but we can talk about that another time.
Okay. But
not being strict about additional properties.
Yes.
And maybe optionally not being strict about additional properties if the version is greater than.
Right. Okay. So, but it sounds like yes, we do want to wait on that, and so I think John is still traveling, but I'll be talking with him and Jason and Sylvan about all that so that can get going.
Great. Moving on.
So MathJack CDN stuff.
So there was the MathJack CDN URL has changed. We fixed it in the live notebook, but we missed a fix in the NB convert templates. We've now fixed that. We've backported the fix, but we're getting quite a few complaints about it. And the question was really, do we do another release now, or do we try and wait for NB format 4 to be ready, because we know we need to do another 2.x release once that's done. And it sounds like NB format 4 is still waiting long enough that we should get another release out now. There's only 3 fixes that have gone in since 2.2. I don't know if there are any more that we ought to backport.
Yeah, we can do it. I would be fine doing a 2.2.1.
I vote for that. This is a nasty one because people end up with completely broken conversions because of that CDN issue. So I would vote for a 2.2.1, not for a big 2.3.1, but because it really is a very minor thing. It's minor but fairly urgent, and since the NBF4 is a complicated one, and we may still run into something else that we hadn't thought of that makes us wait another week, I would rather not. I would rather push this out, and Conda and Canopy have been pretty good lately at pushing things out quickly, and same with pip. I mean, with pip it becomes available quickly to users. So I favor doing this sooner rather than later.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can. Or Thomas did the last release. He can do it all himself. So yeah, we can do. You can do a bug fix release. That's easy.
Great.
So the next thing is kernel Loco dimensions. So I would really like to get I'd really like to get this into the spec and start displaying kernel logos. We're thinking about things like how to make the default kernel configurable, although maybe the sticky UI thing negates the need for that. But I'm keen to encourage kernels to integrate with our machinery rather than, maintaining a separate profile that starts the server up the way they want.
Absolutely.
And I think getting some of their branding into the notebook is a key part of that. So, yeah, I mean, where do we want to display kernel logos? How much is the design of that going to change for 3.0? The essential question we need to answer is what shape of kernel logo is it? What are the dimensions that we should be telling people to draw their logo in?
Well, so a couple of questions. I think the first one is aspect ratio, and after that, I think we should think, are we going to allow, and my inclination would be yes, but I don't know if there's issues, why not, to support vector formats, because then there's no issue of rendering. It's just a vector image with a specified aspect ratio, and I don't know if it's a problem with just allowing SVGs there. I would vote for SVG logos being allowed. And
the only kind of argument against allowing different formats of logos, I think, is that it makes the logic that much more complicated. I mean, if there's only a single file type and name allowed, then when you pick a kernel, we can just say, set the source of this image to this path.
Well, but I would say at least SVG and PNG. I mean, not supporting vector stuff these days with browsers and screens at wildly different resolutions. Having PNG only seems a little odd, but I'm not aware.
The way it's done is you just have a double resolution PNG.
So I think people will be installing kernels from different places enough that SVG in this context would be a security risk. Hey, Fernando, check out this really cool new Python kernel I built.
But when you select the kernel, it's running a process on your system.
Yeah, kernels are in things you need to install and then select.
But again, there's a potential to run code without explicit user action. Right?
Oh, but when
the kernel, it's running code. Like,
yeah,
but the kernel logo displays when you open a notebook.
No, but the kernel could start.
When you open a notebook.
If the kernel at start could already do arbitrary things, Brian, I think that horse has already left the barn.
Yeah, if you're installing
if your kernel spec can include
a script.
RMRF/, like the kernel command can be RMRF/.
I mean, the kernel command is an executable command. It has to be able to run code by definition in order to start a kernel. If the script that starts the kernel, instead of doing Python, does rm-rf $home, you're hosed. The kernel is a script.
Valid kernel spec.
Yeah, the kernel is a script.
Everything kernel.
And you can't ship a kernel in a notebook. There's no...
No, I know that.
You have to install it like installing any other package.
I don't think SVG logos open any more security holes than the kernel spec. I mean, than the notion of having kernels already has, which is arbitrary executable code.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's. But so my. I'm sorry.
So SVGs, if we, you can use an SVG in just a source key in an image tag. So if the image file name is the logo file name equals, then SVGs will just work.
Well,
we'll pick the display, so they, since we know the display resolution, we'll tell them the display resolution, there's a logical resolution for them to make the PNG, but we still have to force PNG or SVG. But we still have to force the display size. So I don't think there's really any complexity in scoping any logo format if you make the logo file name.
And do we? I think we do. Go ahead.
You do have to worry a bit more about security, because if somebody, I mean, if we're just copying from the kernel spec to the source code of the image, then you could just put an arbitrary URL in there.
Yeah, you would.
It's not an illogical thing to do if you can load the logo over the internet rather than from a local file. But it doesn't. If that's that will be in the kernel spec, therefore it will be in the notebook. Therefore, again, you've got a document that can load this SVG on load. So I suppose if it's
I don't think
something from the web. So
yeah, I don't think we should allow kernel specs to trigger loading of assets somewhere else, because then
we're able to run arbitrary JavaScript, right? Right, there needs to be a kernel.js just like there's a custom.js in a profile. Yeah,
no, but I mean, my main concern with assets hosted elsewhere is, what if Julia points their kernel spec logo to julia.org and someone hacks julia.org and starts serving up a SVG kernel logo that's problematic.
But can we prevent that kernels pull external assets, since they can run arbitrary JavaScript on start? I mean, we should
prevent, but we can discourage.
Yeah, well, we can suggest. I fully agree with you, Brian, and I was already thinking exactly of that, which I think in the guidelines of how to write a good kernel spec, we should say projects should package these things as static assets rather than loading them from external websites, in order to improve both robustness, so that people can work offline even if they're on a plane without online access, and for security reasons, so that this attack vector is closed. But I don't think we can prevent that from ever happening, given that kernels are allowed to execute arbitrary JavaScript on start.
Well, I think we can, in the sense that the kernel spec, when it specifies the logo, it's just a file name that we resolve by looking in that directory.
We can't for the kernel spec in general.
No. What I'm saying, Brian, sure. With the logo, yes. But what I'm saying is, I don't know that plugging that particular tiny hole, I don't think makes a real difference in security, given that the JavaScript could do the same thing separately on its own. Am I missing something? It seems to me that, let's imagine we disallow external assets at the logo level. The custom JS can still go and do whatever it wants, and it could pull custom. Let's say that they want to provide custom CSS, and they decide to pull it into JavaScript at runtime. It would be a
kernel starts. The kernel's starting. It can still do whatever it likes on the kernel side. But I think what Brian means is just blocking it, because we're trusting the kernel, but blocking the kernel from trying to do that obvious thing. It doesn't stop the kernel from doing other things. But
I mean, for example, Fernando, we may, if we discover a hostile kernel that's loading nasty things from or loading assets from the internet that we don't trust, we may actually blacklist that kernel. On behalf of our users, we may say, we do not trust that kernel in any way, shape, or form. You should never run it, and we blacklist it because it.
How do we?
Yeah, until it changes its name by one character.
Yeah.
So this original discussion was about the images, right? About could you allow SVG? So the attack vector for SVG is the same attack vector for XML, or at least should be viewed that way, because you can load remote entities from XML, and so load remote entities from SVG. If you disable the GTD parsing, then we can allow the SVG directly. Otherwise, the SVGs, even if it's local, is a local file, and they bundled it, they can make it fetch something else.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. Then I think we should, like you said, Fernando, just tell people here's what a good kernel spec will involve, but not actually try to enforce that at the code level.
So, going back a bit, do we want to like allow different kinds of file and specify that in the kernel spec, or do we want to just have a single file name that is allowed? I believe you can embed bitmap images in an SVG, can't you?
Probably.
I think so. Oh, yes, you can. I think it has to resolve it.
The answer could be, if you want a bitmap image, then embed a bitmap in an SVG and so.
I mean, is the logic?
All SVG authoring tools are terrible.
Yeah. Is it that complicated to simply support? I mean, we're not talking about supporting 150 different file formats. We're talking about saying
It's
you can have.
It's not the formats. It's that if we specify the format, we can specify the path, and we can just say, set the image path to, kernels Julia logo.svg or whatever. We don't need an extra field to tell us what file to look at.
But can
if there's any more than one logo format, then then basically the logo file name has to be in the kernel spec.
Well, either that, or you need a handler on the server that can, check, does this possibility exist? If so, serve that. Otherwise,
no.
This.
Can't we? Would it not work to simply check if logo.svg is present, use it. Otherwise, default to look at logo.png.
Yeah, you can't do that on the JavaScript side.
What's that?
You can't do that on JavaScript.
You can't.
No, because you don't know that the files exist.
So I don't.
Unless you want to do like AJAX requests to fetch the content and then write it with base 64 into the source, but then you won't get any. That's kind of the way.
I think the kernel spec should specify the name of the file, and that we should load that as image source in the browser, and whatever they name it, we'll load it. And we don't.
I'd be totally okay with that.
I don't want us to get into allowing them to save like 4 different logos, and then we have to somehow decide which one to serve. That's crazy. Like, we can tell them, you can put one there, and it needs to be an image that a browser can display. That's what we do.
Give us a name, and with one restriction, it has to be square aspect ratio, because we're going to force it, and we give the default.
Well, actually, that's part of what we've still got to discuss.
Yeah, that was the first question. That hasn't been answered yet.
Aspect ratio square.
Oh, okay.
And default.
What size and what aspect ratio?
I would say aspect ratio. I would say
square. Absolutely.
Square. Kernel logo should be square.
Yep.
And then default render size. That I don't know. Probably something that works reasonably well at low reses, but we ask for high res one so that it can be, so that a sort of
the only thing to tell them is the display size. They can make the image whatever they want. We just tell them what size it's going to display.
Well, I think on the display size.
I need to step out for a sec.
On the display size, I think we just need to do a little bit of design work to figure out where this is going to go. I mean, if it goes in the heading, the top heading level, it has to be really small. I mean, that heading level is only 40 pixels high.
The current logo is 48 pixels.
Oh,
the IPython notebook logo is 48 pixels, or 48 or 24? 24 pixels.
Yeah, I was going to say the whole heading area is 41 pixels high.
Yeah, so the logo itself is 24. I don't see an excellent reason for it to be anything different from that unless you're redesigning the whole thing.
I'm fine with, for now, just matching those. I mean,
24 pixels square.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we put the Jupyter logo there, we might want to revisit some of the design of that heading area, but for now, just do it the same height.
But that's...
Of course, this is part of the kernel spec, so there's a lot of inertia in saying. So if you think that it might change, then we probably should not say what size it is, because we don't know what size it is.
Yeah, the point of saying this is so that 20 other kernels can put Loco in there.
I mean, what's the harm at telling telling people it should be at least 128 by 128? And we may display it smaller than that, but we're not going to display it bigger than that. Basically hedge, right? If we tell people to make it really small, the problem is in the future we might run into a case where we want to make it bigger and everyone will have to redo the logos. If we tell people to make it bigger than we ever imagined needing it, then we're safe forever.
That's not true, because a 256 square logo doesn't necessarily draw reasonably at 24 pixels square. In fact, most don't.
Yeah, so it's pretty...
They just don't infinitely scale down in a way that actually looks sensible. Like your line weights change and all that stuff if you want to... Right, the tiny GitHub Octocat is not the giant GitHub Octocat just shrunk. They take a lot of detail out because tiny details look terrible.
SVG handles that okay, right?
For them, as long as it's a sufficiently simple, not always, no.
Yeah. No, obviously it depends.
SVG scales up fine. It doesn't. Scaling down it's not a like image math problem. It's a what is appropriate content, what is an appropriate level of detail to try to include. So just saying make it huge definitely doesn't answer the question. But this is why icon file formats are usually like a zip file of a half a dozen sizes.
Let's define our own Jupyter icon file format.
But specifically because you can't make one file display well at a bunch of different sizes.
I mean,
if we want it to display at a bunch of different sizes, we should ask them to make multiple files.
Then what about starting out telling people to do 32 by 32, and then and make the sizing explicit?
Which already wouldn't.
Smaller than what we want, given that we want it double resolution.
Yeah, 48 by 48 is the kind of the smallest size that the current thing that we would display. If we did the same as the existing Loco, the logical size would be 48 square. And if you want a power of 2, then it should be 60.
I just think with the new logo and then also the multi-user notebook server and possible changes to the heading area, I don't at all trust that our heading is going to look the same 6 months from now. And I don't know how it's going to look, but I think the chances of changes are very significant. And I mean, hold on, let me see. Local home.
Well, I think we do need to come to some decision about this before 3.0 so that Kernel can include it.
Can we, for now, say nothing about it and wait till we get further along and start to know a little bit more about how?
The reason I put this in the agenda was that I'm getting a bit fed up with pushing this down the road, and I would like to push forward some kind of decision about it.
Since if things might change, I think since these things, if we might want to use it in multiple sizes and multiple circumstances, I think the notion of multiple logo sizes is probably something we want to deal with.
Yeah, we discussed having like a full-size logo for displaying when the kernel is selected, and a like favicon-sized 16 by 16 or whatever for displaying in the menu next to its name.
So maybe we do something like, say...
In the menu and in the dashboards, because I would imagine the dashboard will want to eventually be able to show, that may not be a 3.0 feature, but eventually it would be very nice to show have the dashboard basically update the notebook icons and replace them with the kernel icons so that you can see visually which ones are in each language. And I know that requires reading into the file, so I know that may not happen right away. But
or it doesn't actually have to. Like, one thing you could do is only update that on save or something.
Yeah, once you know.
You're not doing extra reads.
Or, I mean, you could only show it notebooks that have a running kernel would be an easy way to...
It would be a good indicator for this kernel is, this kernel's open and running this kernel.
Yeah.
So there are ways you could do it without having to read all files on directory listing.
Hold on, let me see.
So I just mean, the main reason I say this is we could have, logo 48.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I'm
specifying that we are using the 48 pixel logo, and that's part of the logo 48. And then later we use, we need this logo, and we say, okay, that's this now.
Okay, in this case though, I would like to push back some more on the idea of putting logo file names in the kernel spec, because I think if you're getting multiple sizes of logo, that gets messy. I'd like to just have a single file name
well, if we want just a single, if we want a single file name, I think we have to wait till we know exactly what that size is going to be. And
I mean,
don't think we have that
single file name for each size of logo. Logo 48. Or whatever.
And
okay.
Yeah, because this is the way that Coco does multi-resolution stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? One of the problems with using double resolution everywhere is that if you're not on a double resolution display, you're wasting a bunch of bandwidth.
Yeah.
And it also comes up with desktop displays. You're wasting a bunch of memory drawing too much, and so the way Coco, I believe, handles this is with magic file names, that you have file name and then it's x by y, .png or whatever, and then you just create as many versions of that as you want, and then it loads one for depending on the appropriate environment. So you say, I want logo.png, and then the code says, in this context, I want x by y, or z by w, or whatever.
Yeah.
In terms of the URL stuff, we could, we could have a URL handler, like I think Thomas was talking about, that's like kernel spec /julia/logo, and then that could do, logo. That can just do a simple blob.
What size you're asking?
Yeah, and you can use your URL parameter for the what size, or an extra path. Whatever. You can have a logo handler.
I'd just do it with a file name and a convention, to be honest, like logo-48.
Yes, but that won't work with that. If you force everybody to use PNG, that's okay. If you want to not support SVG, but if you want to support at more than one file format, any number more than one, then you have to use a special.
I still very seriously think actually we should just do SVG, and the answer for bitmap images is to put them in an SVG.
Oh no. I mean,
it's a trivial thing to do. I mean, you could write a script that does take PNG, embed it in an SVG. I'm sure that's like half an hour's work or something.
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a huge burden, Brian, because it is
I think it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I think we have to really, if we don't want to have people use too high resolution, that we're downsizing. I think we just have to embrace that explicit image sizes. And we say, right now the logo that's in the heading on the notebook page is X pixels high. And for that, we look for a particular file name.
In this case, the file name would be like logo-48.svg.
Something like that. And now, just looking at our current logo situation, that 24 pixel height that Min was quoting has absolutely no white space around it. And if we make the kernel logos that size, they're going to look too small. Basically, there's the way we handle the space above and below that IPython notebook image is not any spacing in the image itself. It's actual, I don't know if it's margin or padding. But I think realistically that would be a teeny kernel logo.
Yeah, 24 pixels is pretty small. I mean, the fav icons I think are 16 by 16, so
Yeah.
50% larger than a fav icon would be 24 pixels.
Yeah, it's very small.
And so I think even before we make a decision, we literally want to create some logos of our own and try them out in this UI and see, okay, is it 30 pixels? Is it 32? And I think we just have to be pixel specific. And in a different context, we're going to tell them in this context it's 48 by 48 or 64 by 64, whatever.
The icons next to the in the dashboard, the current icons are, it looks like they're vertically about 12 tall or 14 tall. I'm trying to measure them. I think they're 12 tall.
So,
If you inspect them in the browser, it should show.
Yeah, I think they're 12 tall. That's pretty small. I don't know that our, like the Jupyter logo would, I'm not sure how it will render at 12.
Yeah, we probably need to make adjustments for it to draw small.
Yeah. Let me try rendering just the center one at 24 pixels. Export bitmap.
But I don't know that we need to do the fine design work now. I think we just have to decide on what we support at the spec level. And then that gives us freedom to make the design choices later, basically. I mean,
Yeah, it's pretty tiny. At 12 pixels tall, the current one would need manual. A 12 pixel render has to be done by hand, basically. It's so small that anything automatic just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, that was always going to be the case. And we will need, if not a 12 pixel, we will need at least a 16 by 16 one for the fav icon. So,
yeah.
So wherever we render this image, if we allowed for SVG, we should stick it in an iframe too. Because you can run script from within the SVG. You can put on-click and everything else inside the documents.
still a kernel, though. It can still run on tray code. We went through.
Right? Well, that's true. But what I'm saying there is that if they have the SVG there, right, and then it loads a remote resource, and originally that was vanilla. You know, they use that to kind of give them touch metrics for, oh, someone's using our kernel, oh, someone's using our kernel. And then later that site gets hacked.
To discourage people doing that.
At least it isn't able to run code as an image.
no, I mean, this was my original point, and I think they convinced me that, well...
Because I just tested it in a separate notebook while you were talking about it. I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, so if we had the image there, we can run it.
Yeah.
I really want to discourage people from doing like sneaky method selection through images. So.
But you may not.
The people you're talking about doing.
Hey,
things.
Hold on.
Can other people hear you guys? What
It was
happened?
all buzzing. I couldn't hear it.
Yeah, there was some distortion.
Min Thomas. Oh gosh, can't. There's something wrong with your audio right now. We can't. Nobody can understand you guys. Nothing. It's a completely distorted buzz, incomprehensible distorted buzz. Okay, now you're muted. Nice. That's it's nice and quiet.
Improvement.
Yeah. Very zen. Very zen. Can't hear anything.
Yeah, and now it's all crappy.
Okay, now it's back.
Oh, that's better. Cool.
Okay.
Turning it off and on again.
Whatever.
Are you running Windows?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Thomas was saying he would like to discourage people from doing the kind of touch metrics kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of thinking that...
We're kernel authors, and you have to explicitly install a kernel.
Uh-huh.
It's like, you know, a Python package or anything. You know, you have to install this thing, and you have, you know, installing a kernel is not the easiest thing in the world.
Kyle's point was that they could be doing something kind of dodgy but vaguely acceptable, maybe.
And
install the kernel as a remote URL, and then that, you know, if somebody hacks that remote URL, then which is valid, but I hope kernel authors won't do dodgy touch metric stuff.
No, I mean, like, so for the project, right? Would you want to know, you know, that people were using the service, like the same way that Atom, like, does its own Google Analytics stuff? Like, I can imagine someone. Maybe we're all gone down in the future, but Jupyter sticks around in the long term, and someone does it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying no one will. I'm saying.
Or maybe that's okay. Maybe you just let it happen. And...
Yeah, I think because of, in general, we are trusting, or let me think.
But yeah, no, I think if we allow SVG, I think it's probably reasonable to try frame that.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have anything that resembles consensus on what we're going to do here?
Oh.
The options are, the issue is really whether we put a custom URL handler to allow multiple file names, or because even if we make a hard convention that it's logo, people maybe specify what we can call the base name. They can give us the name, but it's the base name, and then it's dash this, dash that for different sizes, and base one for the base. That still requires a custom handler, right?
No, because it depends on.
It requires either a custom handler or something in the kernel spec, both of which I think it's nicer to avoid if possible, and they're perfectly doable.
I think my preference right now would be to limit choice to simplify. Basically, tell everyone it's PNG only, and the file names have to be logo-pixelsize.png, and if that's it.
And we can start with that, and later allow vector logos. I mean, these aren't going to be huge. So the issue of, as long as we allow a high res enough, what's the highest res device reason where the notebook we're running a notebook and I know there's crazy high DPI phones out there, but I don't think a phone is a sensible device to use this on. So I think we should be looking at iPad, kind of tablets and up. Tablets and computers are really kind of the device sizes. So 256, basically 256, 128, 48, and 16.
Well, I mean, the point that they made earlier is that those, if we decide to do the logo 30 pixels.
Yeah, but this is how most. It's relatively rare to use vector icons in any context. It's with icon fonts on the web that's becoming increasingly common, but on desktop things, what they do is an icon is actually
a collection
of images, and you pick
but do we
the nearest one, right? So in your if you're on OS 10 or something, in your dock there are a bunch of icons, and you can zoom continuously to change the size. Based on the size of the dock, it picks the right image source.
Okay, I thought you were saying.
I think it just picks the next size up.
And interpolates from there.
If I'm displaying 48, then I pick the first image that's larger than 48 and scale it down.
And you interpolate it down.
Oh, sorry. Okay, hold on. I got to get this.
And that's.
And on other systems, I think it's common that you only. I think it's probably more common than the arbitrary scaling. Actually, I think is that you have a set of choices of size which correspond to the available image sizes, and if some of the image sizes are missing, then they're multiples of one another. So you can pick a larger one and just halve the size or whatever.
And since browsers do downsample PNGs reasonably well, if the spec says that you have to supply 256, 128, 64, and 32, and we end up picking 30, using the 32 one and rendering it at 30, I think is not a huge deal, because as far as I know, these days the downsample interpolation quality of PNG libraries and browsers is not so terrible that doing an off-size downsampling is all that bad.
I think perfectionist kernel authors would still get annoyed if the default size was 2 pixels off what they'd supplied. Because however good the downsampling is, it's not going to look as good as.
Yeah, and it depends on the size of your pixels, right? The giant fat pixels on my monitors that I'm looking at right now are, when one of those pixels is aliased or something, it can stand out a fair amount.
Yeah.
Like if I had a really hard-edged black and white logo, and then you change that by a pixel or two, that can look a bit wonky.
Yeah, it blurs.
Yeah, if it's a gradient, you're not going to be able to tell no matter what.
Yeah.
But there is lots of precedent for using fixed interval, and you could even say, arbitrary interval. We don't fix interval, but I would maybe not do that. But yeah, fixed interval icon sizes.
But let's try to make a decision that even if it's not perfect, so that we can move forward, because Brian, I think we muted you somehow. There was background noise. Can you unmute yourself?
Hi.
Hey, good. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, what about doing 16, 32, 64, 128 for now? The simplest possible factor 2 scaling.
Yeah, that's what I had just suggested, and maybe also a 256.
And do we require that they provide them all, or do we do our own pick the nearest one?
I would just have.
In practical terms, we can suggest that people supply them all. I guess a lot of kernel authors are just going to supply the one that we actually use.
Once we know that.
And what do we do if it's not there?
Yeah, see, I just don't want to write all the custom logic that tries these. I think we should just tell people the kernel spec involves these logo sizes, and we reserve the right to use whatever one is appropriate.
So if you get a kernel spec that's nothing but a command line on the IPython notebook page, there's going to be a little broken image. We're going to display a little broken image thing.
No, I think we should have.
Wait.
I'm fine with us having one handling path for a missing image. What I don't want to do is have a sequence of, well, let's first try the 32 pixel one, and then try the next one bigger, 64. That's not there. Now let's try the 16 pixel one. Like I don't. That's crazy to me.
But that still seems like that's server side logic.
Yeah, we just have an HTTP handler that does dynamic downsampling. No, I'm kidding.
No, but I mean, doing the one redirect to, it's still server side. Whether you do it as a redirect or you change what data you serve, it's server side. Unless you don't want to do image source, you want to do Ajax load. If it fails, load something else. If you don't want to do Ajax loading of image data,
I don't.
This is server side logic.
Okay. And are we okay with that server side logic?
Yeah, I think the picking the image file is trivial logic, but if you want to just 404 actually redirects to the whatever default, a little kernel, I guess, would be the right. Just maybe candy corn.
Let's just have the logo disappear, shall we?
How about candy corn? Or not?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a blank white. I mean, it just goes
I
away.
think we really just want to avoid showing the little browser open image icon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So nothing. A one by one white is fine.
Yep.
We can put a K there, like a letter K that says this is a kernel. That's it. I mean, something really.
We could do.
Or just blank.
I would just do blank.
Yeah, just
The
blank.
argument against doing blank is if you want to attach any UI to that.
We could do what Gmail on Android devices, for those who haven't seen it. If you don't have an avatar, it uses the first letter of your name in a little coloured square, and it actually, the colour of the square does actually vary. All the examples there are blue for some reason, but
I don't want to have to, on the server side, dynamically create a logo that has the first letter of that kernel name.
we could. There's only 26 of them, right? Unless we stop allowing both kernel names.
Well, we could. I mean, if we have SVG there, we can generate it.
Did I go away?
No.
No, you're there. Okay, let's go with blank for now, and later, if we think this is worth it, we can add those like black colored squares with a letter. That could be.
Okay, so
that could be useful, but let's go with blank for now if we don't find it.
Okay. Fixed file name.
So logo
Sizes.
logo-16.png.
Yeah, logo dash n.
32.png up to 256. Server side logic for returning the right one.
Or it sounds like I was the only one who wanted to actually do the interpolation. So the server side logic for redirecting to empty. One of those two.
So would the server side logic, if it's going to look for the one that it thinks should be there, if it.
Brian, you got Brian. Rewind 15 seconds or 10 seconds.
So the server will look to see if the requested image is there. If it is, it returns it. If it's not, it redirects to a blank image.
Yes.
Okay.
And honestly, that logic is so simple that later, if we want to make it fancier and actually return the next higher up, we can make it a little bit more. If needed, we can make it fancier. I mean, that's a trivial few lines of Python. So.
And then the other thing is, are we going to tell people that these should have transparent backgrounds? Because otherwise, if people,
I would say that's up to them. But if icons should have transparent backgrounds.
Yes, I mean, I know there's people that run notebooks with solid black backgrounds, for example, or gray.
Obviously, we can't enforce that, but there are things we can enforce, and there are things we recommend. And so we recommend.
Well, there's very little that we can enforce.
Exactly.
I mean,
So we recommend
registry of kernels or anything.
So, and also just a random. So in the Jupyter design repository, there are already logos, both SVG and some sized PNG images for Python, Julia, and R that we used on the Jupyter website, and so we can use that source to get our own Python logos.
This will also be a question of, for the IPython kernel, do we have an IPython logo or a Python logo? Because once the branding of the notebook changes to Jupyter, that will be the only place that an IPython logo will show up if we
I think we should leave that to be an IPython logo, because we are running what executes is not sort of naked Python. It has all of the IPython extended syntax. And it's not just about the UI features or the fact that we do more tab completion than a Python shell. It's the fact that we allow syntax which does not exist in the Python language.
Okay. Yep, I think that makes sense. I put that down. And let's...
And obviously, and for now, we can use our square sticker one, and later we'll have a better... When we have a nicer IPython logo, we can add that. But for now, the square sticker is more than fine. And people are used to it, so.
Okay.
And favicon for the smaller sizes.
Favicons are at 16, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe so.
And people may choose, for example, often I'm looking at various favicons, and favicons are often non-transparent backgrounds, precisely because they're so small. It's easier to enforce legibility by having them, by choosing a solid background.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
So you have a bit. So, but people will render.
It's pretty much never white. If you have a background, it's usually not. It's usually a color.
Right.
Yeah, if you want it on a light background, then you go for transparent rather than.
Okay.
All right. Python 3.0, just a quick checkpoint on release plans. Thomas and I talked yesterday about Thomas starting to work on the terminal widget, and then
you mean not a widget, but a terminal page for the
the terminal thingy, thingy in the
Once we've got the URL, it will be easy to make a widget for it too.
Yes, we do it in Now that we've chosen widgets to mean something other than the traditional generic thing, now we have to use another synonym for widgets to mean widgets.
Thingy. A terminal thingy. So Thomas will start working on the terminal thingy,
Great.
And then as soon as we have the terminal thingy, we can look at the editor thingy.
Okay. And is the terminal thingy going to be just its own page?
That's my current plan, yeah.
Okay, so on the
dash, have a URL so you can embed it in an iframe if you want it elsewhere. Okay,
so.
Yeah, so you could do a terminal here that just makes an iframe.
And is it going to be a full screen terminal? Or do we need? And I'm trying to think. Do we need any page layout?
No, I think it should have
take a header, banner.
Yeah, I think it should have a frame around it for a few UI elements that are common to all the pages, maybe a way to get back to the dashboard, etc.
Okay, so the standard sort of page layout we're using.
Yeah, I think so.
Just mirror that. Okay.
And
Well, I quite want a way to make it full screen so that you can then full screen your browser as well and pretend that you're just working at console mode when you're actually using a virtualized terminal running in JavaScript through a browser.
yeah,
I mean, that's what the whatever it's called, fixed term does.
Yeah.
By default, is 100% of the window.
but it would be easy to have a button on it that makes it 100% of the window that expands it
I was largely joking about this. I don't feel a particular need to
on request.
read my browser and pretend that it's 1989.
Okay.
Well, I've got a tool for that.
I'll do it. I do everything in the cloud.
Now, one question that I was thinking: do we allow more than one terminal to be open, independent ones to be open?
So we vaguely said during the dev meeting, no MVP, just one terminal. If you want multiple, then do screen or whatever
tmux,
inside it. Yeah.
And I'd be okay with that. I mean, I think eventually it probably would be nice to have more than one, but maybe after we figure out what the right UI is for handling them.
Yeah.
So okay. Yeah, I just wanted to check if anybody had objections to that. I'm totally okay with that.
So one thing that we wanted to do at the dev meeting, but we never got to, was to translate the results of our dev meeting onto the Trello boards that we had. And I'd started to do that. And one thing I quickly ran into is that there was this awkward. We were having things in multiple places, one on the 3.0 board and one on the individual notebook board. And so I've gotten rid of the 3.0 board because the only things we have cards for currently are 3.0.
Mm-hmm.
And so the main boards here are the Jupyter/Notebook board and the Jupyter/Jupyter Hub board. And those basically have the current main things that need to happen for 3.0. I mean, there's the widget board as well. John is more managing that one, but it does. I mean, there it's more complex, and he actually has a 3.0 column on that board. And so
why am I not? Weird. Why am I not seeing? I was logged in and I was seeing all the boards before, and now I'm not.
I've not renamed any of them.
That's weird. Well, let's not waste time on this. I don't understand why, but I'm not seeing any boards.
Did you log on through Google once and some other Trello-specific account the other time?
It's possible, yeah. That's why I don't want to waste anyone's time on this right now, because I can see some of them, but not others. So I can see design and fundraising, but I can't see the others, and I have no idea why that's the case.
Yeah, you probably did it under 2 accounts.
Yeah. Oh well. Go ahead.
I just wanted to let people know that I had done that, and I'm going to do a little more on that to sort of finish translating the last parts of the dev meeting. For example, when we talked about documentation, we didn't. I mean, we wrote down some of that, but not all of it.
Good. A quick status check on the
hub.
On the hub, just so that we kind of know how things are going.
I got some basic HTML pages up. I haven't done the admin page.
Okay. What do you need from us on that front?
Nothing.
Okay. Well, let us know if you need either help or review or discussion.
Yeah, no, I'm just hopping between this and ND format 4, basically.
Cool.
Okay.
That's perfect. And I think it seems like we're reasonably moving forward if we land NB format, the editor, the terminal, and the hub. And in the meantime, John and Jason and Sylvan and Brian move forward on the widgets. It looks like we're going to be reasonably okay for fall release. Am I missing something?
Oh, there was one thing that I do need from someone. Kyle Kyle is going to work on investigating OAuth, doing a deployment with a custom OAuth authenticator, which I'm sure will need some changes to Jupyter Hub. So doing that will be useful.
Okay, so I'm planning on teaching with the Jupyter Hub starting the 27th
of September.
Of this month.
Of this month, and
I get cranking.
I'm willing to. Basically, between now and then, I just have to make sure everything's ready for the class, and so I'm willing to help sort of plug in different ways. One thing I'm going to sort of spawn a separate thread to have Adrian working on is I'll still try to wireframe the pages and get her working on some more visual design for those pages. But I think
I'm doing my best to just get content on the page.
Exactly. Absolutely. That's. I can use Jupyter Hub before Adrian's finished design stuff for it. I mean, but then I was thinking about maybe doing OAuth, and so Kyle,
do they have OAuth over there? Do you know if they do? Have you checked?
No, but I would just have the students use their Gmail account.
OAuth over Gmail.
Yeah, or some simple like that. I just don't want to manage passwords.
Yeah.
Well, you still have to manage the tokens then, but I mean that's in the back end.
Yeah, no, exactly. I don't want to. Yeah.
Yeah, manage their passwords. If they have to reset passwords, they reset it there. They can re-register with a callback. Yep.
That's exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I want to work on that. I did family time instead, and a little bit of the Docker stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, let me know if you need help with that.
Okay.
All right.
One other thing. I was thinking about the multi-user notebook experience, and there's a couple. We had talked about improving the UI for users when a notebook is read-only.
Yeah.
And read-only by the definition of the file system, and so thinking about the sharing experience for the multi-user server. And I think there's a few more things we might want to do. One is if a user can read a notebook but not write it, it would be nice if the make a copy item in the file menu allowed them to make a copy in a directory that they had write permissions to.
And how would you pick that directory?
I think it would be the top level notebook directory.
What if they don't have write permissions there?
Yeah, I know. This is what I started to realize. But
so, how do they have that notebook to begin with that they couldn't?
I just browsed. I browsed to Min's home directory, and he had set
an open directory that you can read but not write.
Mm-hmm.
Or for example, you set up a student account, and part of the skeleton user directory is creating a bunch of reference notebooks that are owned by root.
Yeah, so if they get added automatically, I just want to add them as
they're not files you can write.
Yeah.
That's it.
But I was also thinking about maybe the way I distribute homework is I just put it in a directory that students have read access to.
Yeah.
But they need a easy way of copying that back to their wherever they want to put it.
We could have like copy to UI that. Yeah, I don't know how to do that without a title.
Yeah, and there's a question: is do you do single notebook copy, but do you also offer the option of copying directories? Because there's a very good chance that Brian's homework stuff is going to have other associated data files and other. I'm a little worried, Brian. I know that this is a usability issue, but I'm a little worried that it's probably more than we can do in short order. And so one option is just to put in that directory a very simple script. You can write a simple script that basically a notebook that is copy me.ipynb and just tell the students run that notebook. and what that notebook does is, because it can find what their personal home directory is, it can detect, and it can also detect where those files are in the file system. It can do a recursive copy of that entire blob into their home directory. And so basically, whenever there's a new homework set every week, you tell them, go here and click on the copy me direct notebook and run. It's a one-cell notebook. They execute it and they close it. And then they go to their home directory, and you have a convention that it's homework 1, homework 2, homework 3, and they get, that thing will copy wholesale recursively that directory together with images and whatnot.
Okay, so basically, go solve this on my own.
Well, I'm worried that this is more delicate UI than we may manage to give you robustly in 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not sure.
Know, if you're teaching on the 24th, NB format 4 is not going to be final in master.
Oh no, I know that.
So that means you are. That probably means you're teaching. You're going to let your students use IPython stable, IPython 2?
No, I'll use master.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in control of everything, so I can redeploy and
life on the wild side. But Brian, I am worried about. I'm trying to hedge against what I think is the very real possibility that we may not have a UI that's usable enough, and that the promise of a UI that does this and that ends up not doing the right thing may make it worse for your students. And so it may be, this is the kind of thing that may be easier for you to just script it first.
No, so I agree with you on my time scale. I will do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is one of the when people start to use IPython 3.0 with a multi-user server, they're going to say, "Hey, I can use these notebooks. I can run them, but I can't save them anywhere."
Absolutely. No, I'm fully aware that this is going to need good UI, but I'm also trying to be super realistic on kind of the MVP situation that we're in and the time scale that we.
It's basically full file manager UI.
Yeah. It gets painfully close to that. You have to have logic for detecting the target directory, for offering whether to do it recursively or not, whether to do it with resources or not, so that it's actually useful. I think there's enough knobs to think about here that we're not going to have an answer.
The terminal widget, it's a very simple. Paste this cp-r command.
Yeah. Well, or I mean, and that's the one that I'm saying. That cp command can be encoded in the README of the week. Basically, you can have a convention that every homework set has a README, or even, I mean, you use the index.
Clone, right? I mean, you can get clones from the file system.
I mean, part of this is I'm trying I'm trying to also assess if the terminal is going to be in master by then. If the terminal's in master, then I'm not worried. I'll just have the students use that and do whatever they want. I mean, then my ability to do custom things is infinite. My worry is if I'm deploying this and they don't have any terminal.
Yeah, a simple copy operation. I mean, we want the terminal because the terminal, if you need to type interactive passwords, if they try to open a process that uses the terminal as a 2D canvas with cursors, all hell breaks loose in the notebook, or it just doesn't work. But for a simple, like a sequence of 3 copy-paste command, 3 file copy operations, that's the kind of thing that you put in a $bash cell, and you're fine. Like cp-r dot to $home/ homework 1,
homework, yeah. Okay.
Homework 2, homework 3, and it's 2 lines of bash, and each week you can fine-tune it to do the right thing, rather than hoping that we get the UI right, and if the UI isn't quite right, now you're answering questions to 50 students about they clicked on this thing and it didn't do the right thing, and why did it not do the right thing, and they're not finding their way in the UI, and it should have been recursive and it didn't do it recursively, and they're missing the data file for the week. There's too many ways in which it can go wrong at the UI level.
No, I understand. So this is not. I'm fine with us not solving this for my class in 2.5 weeks. But we're also saying we don't want to solve this for 3.0.
We may well not. Yeah, I think I would be totally okay if we tell people the MVP doesn't do this. We know it's important. We'll think about it. We'll try to do it right. In the meantime, use shell-like solutions.
Yeah. Also remember these. Yeah, these are entirely. While this is mostly useful in a multi-user context, these are entirely single-user server features.
Yes. No. Absolutely. I realize.
Yeah.
So is the other part of this is we had mentioned. I mean, we just want to improve the UI messages for when a notebook is opened in read-only mode, and not even allows the user to attempt saving. And what I was wondering is, do we want to add a field in the notebook model, not the notebook document, but the notebook JSON model in the REST API that says like read-only equals true, that when it comes to the front end, we disable save and tell the user, hey, this is read-only.
Yeah, I mean, we already disable save until successful load.
Yeah, that seems
right.
reasonable to me.
Yeah, adding a save isn't going to work. Yeah, adding a read-only key to the notebook model seems okay.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to add just read-only or if you want to do like permissions as a string or in a list or something.
You can have read write, but not execute permission.
Yeah, I think for now, I mean, if they don't have read permissions, then they're never even going to see the notebook.
Yes, no, that's not an issue. And execute permissions, but like if you want, don't allow them to edit. Right. So right now you can execute edit, but you can't save. But of course, that also means that if you do any editing, when you make a copy, you're making a copy of the original. You're not making a copy of what you have.
Yeah.
There's no save as.
Yeah, we don't have a save as. And our notion of copy tries to make a copy in the same location, which means that would also fail. As Ben says, we don't have a notion of save as where you get a UI to choose the target location, a full file save dialog box.
Okay, let's think about the different ways of handling these things. I mean, I don't think we need to decide that today, but we just need to do something so that the user experience is better than it is today.
I mean, I think initially Min's suggestion of on if the file what read only would mean, which is easy to detect from the file storage support, whether it's file system or even a non-file system data store has a notion of read-write permissions. If you don't have write permissions there, then I think Min's suggestion is execute but no editing, no.
Well, I think it makes perfect sense to be able to edit. I think it can go both ways. So.
Well, but I think right now edit without any way of saving would be pretty confusing.
No, if you're just using it as a scratch.
Yeah.
Like I just want to see how changing this would do things, but I don't actually care about saving.
And also, that's exactly the mode you'd want to be able to do with documentation, for example. Open it, play with it, but never save it.
Okay. Then that's fine too. Yeah.
Okay.
So does that point toward a read-only Boolean or a more broad permission key?
I think in this case, because it's not in the notebook document or message spec, I would just start simple and go from there.
Boolean?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, that's easy.
Okay, quickly because we're coming on to noon. We've been at this for 2 hours. I thought it was going to be a short one today. But, Never. Yeah. Every now and then we do. Quickly, Pycon tutorial. Ruben contacted me and I told him that I wasn't going to make it. Apparently the IPython, what he said was that the IPython tutorial last year had been very well received at Pycon and that they really wanted it to happen again. Unfortunately, I'm not going to go, but you guys are going to go. So would you want to submit one?
Yeah, so Thomas, if you want to submit, that'd be cool. I still have another talk I want to submit, and I'm happy to do it with you.
Yeah, the materials are all there. You can watch the one from last year for a reference. You can use my submission, which is on the. I mean, you can literally use my submission and update it as you see fit. But otherwise, use my submission that it would make it very quick.
Sorry, you said it's on the, and then you don't actually say what it's on.
Oh, it's probably. I can probably. I can find it for you offline.
On the internet.
It's on the internet. Yes.
Okay, good. That narrows it down a bit.
And it's probably on my hard disk too, so I can find it for you guys. So would you guys want to do it? I think it would be great. It's just that I can't go, and if you guys want to collaborate on that, I've taught that tutorial alone, but more often we've taught it together. Either Brian and me have taught it a few times together, so it works pretty well as a two-person presentation.
Yeah.
And I actually prefer it as I did it alone at Pycon because I was alone. But it's a bit exhausting both for the presenter and for the audience, so it works nicely as a two-person presentation.
And is this just a general IPython tutorial? It's not.
Yeah, it's a subset. It's what we started the IPython in-depth repo for. Now that repo has grown to having so much material that you could speak for 12 hours out of it. So, but what you do is you make an index file that contains the topics that you're going to present, and you can make small I would recommend that you have a look at my proposal for last year and you watch my presentation and you decide whether you want to cover the same material, which apparently people did like a lot, and so you could do pretty much the same stuff with updates for the current version, or whether you want to change a little bit, and I would leave that up to your discretion. There's way more material already available in the repo than you can reasonably cover in 3 hours anyway, so you have a lot of freedom to choose.
And do we think we brand it IPython Jupyter or IPython/Jupyter?
Yeah, brand. I think for a couple of years we're going to do a lot of IPython/Jupyter, and in this case it is IPython because you are going to be talking about magics and about aliases and about kind of a lot of the stuff that where IPython goes beyond the Python language to that audience. So it's definitely IPython.
Cool. Glad we got to that one. I got to run. I have to go interview someone.
Okay. Thanks for being here. See you next week.
Yeah.
Well, I won't be here next week. I'm teaching in Seattle next week, but there will be a meeting next week.
I may be here next week.
Okay. Look quickly, last two topics. Needs decision label on GitHub. We have 10 currently. Jesus. Okay.
During the dev meeting about having a separate scheduled meeting for open pull requests, I think we should be doing that. Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah, let's just schedule for the people who need.
Hello?
We're going to mute you, Brian. Muted.
Okay, so we can do that on email. We don't need to do scheduling live on the internet.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So we will not during this meeting.
Okay, and Brian has kind of organized the Trello cards, and so we can just use that to kind of track the big picture.
So I'm sorry, did we decide we are going to have a separate meeting sometime to do the needs decision ones?
Yeah, and possibly more than one, and possibly with different subsets of people, so that not everybody needs to be there, and that way we organize them as the 2 or 3 necessary people are available. They can hop on Google Plus, and if it's, for example, if it's only me and Min and Thomas, that meeting will happen face to face. I'll just do the crazy thing of walking to their office, and if we need other people, then we just do a quick Google Hangout ad hoc.
Okay, I'm around all day today and tomorrow, so
okay.
When we need to do that, let me know.
Okay.
All right. Trello cards. Did you have anything else to say, Brian, other than that note? Okay, good. Quick question, Jess. Was there anything on your mind that might be relevant quickly for today, or that you did not add to the agenda?
I've been working on MD Grader stuff.
You have? Oh, cool.
Yeah. I'm trying to get it into a form that's stable enough to possibly be used by people, but I don't really have any major updates on it at the moment.
Well, I'm just taking notes on the minutes that you've been, and I'll add the. Can you add the URL to it, please, on the hack?
Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm going to be working on some stuff with that in the next few days, so I'll definitely be in touch, Jess.
You guys
Okay, great. Yeah, we should talk more about that.
Okay.
You guys can coordinate. Okay, and Damien, is there anything from your side, quickly?
Oh, it's okay.
Thomas said something.
Thomas, I'm sorry?
Just speaking of extension projects, I'm working on I call it ND parameterize, where you put some variable definitions in the first cell of a notebook, and this tool will generate an HTML form for you to pick those values, and then give it the values you pick, run the notebook, render it for HTML. Just to let people know I'm playing around with that. I have
it's pretty slick.
Repository.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That sounds very cool.
All right, we done?
Yes, I think so.
Bye, Internet.
Bye-bye, everyone.
All right, I just took notes. Bye, everyone. See you. I will see everyone in 2 weeks, and you guys can see each other in a week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.